It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast as we cover the very latest in property news. We do that 7 days a week, every morning, and available at 6 a.m. as heard on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as Amazon. Up to a Thursday morning around the breakfast table, June the 20th today. And as you know, some economists had advocated for a rate increase at Tuesday's RBA meeting, but other economists believe that the decision to maintain rates was right and was prudent, with some economists believing that with ongoing housing price rises and the persistent pressure on living costs for both renters and mortgage holders, holding off putting the cash rate up was the right decision. So now all the eyes are going to be looking ahead to the upcoming June quarter inflation data and what significance that might bring for the RBA's August meeting. That's right, they are meeting again in August. No sooner do we get through one than we look forward to the next one. Well, we don't really look forward to it, but we look ahead is what I should be saying. And there are those economists who are saying that while the RBA is being cautious, they think that the RBA is unlikely to alter rates until 2025. Well, we're all hoping for that.
It's like diving into a treasure trove of real estate gold nuggets, just waiting to be explored with us on the Real Estate Podcast.
So right now, let's catch up with Matthew Hughes, the founder and managing director of Capital Property Advisory there in Perth, about the outlook for the property market with an insightful look at different aspects within the property real estate market there. And a very good morning to you, Matthew. You're somewhere out there in the universe. Whereabouts are you exactly?
Today we are in Florence. So we just arrived here yesterday after some stops in London, Lyon, Bordighera, Nice and Monaco. So we're in Florence for a few days for my birthday, and then we've got a birthday dinner with the family tonight, and then I'm sneaking off on my own for a couple of nights to Barcelona to watch the Spanish Grand Prix, which is I'm very, very excited about.
Oh, yeah, F1, you can't beat it. So happy birthday. So let's first off talk about legislative changes in WA. Now, I know if you're listening to the podcast, for some of you, you will think that, legislative changes, this sounds rather boring, but around property, it's extremely important, and these changes relate to rental laws. So let's step over the proposed changes and what you know about it, Matthew.
Yeah, so they've recently come into effect, and the changes include several key adjustments that are just aimed at enhancing tenant rights and simplifying processes. So the key proposals revolve around limiting rental increases to just once per year, which is important in a rental market like we're in here, just to make sure that it's as fair as possible for tenants and they can maintain some sustainability and affordability in the place that they're in. And also allowing tenants to have pets unless the landlords can provide a valid reason for refusal. And then the other one, the other main one, was allowing tenants to make minor modifications to their rental property. So the reforms are intended to streamline some of the processes for returning security bonds and the like, also to prohibit rent bidding in this market, and just to make sure that rentals are advertised at a fixed price and that there's as much fairness as there can be in a hot market.
Yeah, so as I said, you see, legislative changes, they're pretty important. And if you are a landlord, your interest has probably just been piqued with what Matthew is saying, especially if you are a landlord in WA. So how are these proposed rental law changes going to affect landlords in terms of rental increases and things like pets, etc.?
Yeah, look, under the new laws, as I mentioned a moment ago, then you'll only be able to increase rent once per year. So typically when we would put together a lease, especially in a market like this, we would put in a provision for our landlord, who are our client, to be able to do a 6-month rent review. So that's out the window now. Whilst it's good for landlords to be able to capitalise on a good market, I think it's also good for tenants to know that they've got some sort of stability there in terms of their costs for at least the 12-month typical lease that they're signing. And then regarding pets, landlords won't be able to deny tenants the right to keep pets without a valid reason, and that could be linked to things like property suitability or strata bylaws. But essentially, or historically, what we've seen is that a lot of landlords have a negative attitude towards pets, big dogs especially, and this will just open the door to tenants who do have those sorts of pets, which there are a lot of, to be able to get into a property and not have their application decline for that reason. And if landlords do want to appeal, say no to a pet, they'll have to appeal to the Commissioner for Consumer Protection and provide justification. So it does sort of open the door to a lot of people who do have pets and want to keep them and have struggled to get rentals in the past.
Okay, and I'm thinking that one of the things that could be worth talking about is modifications on a rental property and what tenants can do in this space, and just as importantly, what rights do landlords have regarding any changes to their property?
Yeah, so a couple of the things that tenants might want to change that historically they'd need to seek approval for is things like changing locks, whether it's for a security reason or it could be a domestic violence reason or anything along those lines. They can just go ahead and do that themselves now. Or another key one is securing furniture to walls. So screwing in things like large chests of drawers into a wall, so that I've got a 2 and a 4-year-old at home, and my 4-year-old girl was not really like this. She was a little bit less adventurous, but my 2-year-old boy already is all over everything in the house, and I can just see him climbing up and grabbing hold of a drawer that's open. And if that, I've seen stories, unfortunately, in the past where they've tipped over and landed on children. So the ability to do that without having to ask for permission makes sense to me. But the tenants at the end of the tenancy will still have to restore the property to its original condition. They just don't have to jump through any hoops to do these reasonable things anymore.
All right, so we are talking to Matthew Hughes, having a look at some of these legislative changes in WA. We'll come back, we'll talk more after this.
Every morning from 6 a.m, we bring you the latest real estate news with diverse perspectives from leading industry experts. We deliver the most property podcasts across Australia every week.
Hey, coming up on Monday, we're going to be talking about prefabs and modular buildings, which is, of course, expanding on a recent conversation about the ways that we can try and build ourselves out of this building shortfall dilemma that we are currently in. We are going to be talking to a prefab company that is going to give us their views and their take on all of that. So that is coming up on Monday. Don't forget, of course, if you've got any suggestions or you would like to just let us know what your property story is, you can email us. The email address is myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. Now, highly indebted homeowners, particularly first home buyers and investors with multiple properties, face the toughest challenges following the Reserve Bank's decision to maintain interest rates on Tuesday. Now, Domain ran a piece talking about, despite rates holding steady at 4.3%, experts warn that households may struggle to meet mortgage repayments if inflation persists. Mortgage delinquencies are on the rise, with owner-occupiers slightly surpassing investors in falling behind on repayments, nearing COVID-era highs. And if you look at the high loan-to-value and loan-to-income ratios, that does amplify the risks, especially among first-home buyers in pricier markets like inner Sydney and Melbourne. Economists are highlighting the vulnerability of recent home buyers lacking equity and urging caution amid economic pressures despite the ongoing property price growth.
Decode the property market with insider knowledge and insights to better navigate your real estate journey on the Real Estate Podcast.
And it is a weekday talking real estate right around Australia, and we are catching up with Matthew Hughes this morning, talking about legislative changes in WA. So we've gone through the list a little bit. Let's talk about the rental bonds and how the process for handling the rental bonds could change under new laws.
Yeah, so these changes are aiming to simplify the bond return process just by allowing both tenants and landlords to apply separately for bond disbursement at the end of the tenancy. And disputes over bond payments will now be handled by the Commissioner for Consumer Protection, as we referenced earlier on one of the other matters. And that just creates a more straightforward and less adversarial process compared with the current system, which can sometimes see a property manager and a tenant ending up in magistrates' court. So it'll free up the courts a bit, and it just streamlines things. And again, just creates a bit more fairness for both parties.
Yeah, and there is always this sort of fine balancing act between a tenant and a landlord. Both sort of want to feel that they have some sort of harmony going on. I mean, there's nothing worse when you're at war with either a tenant or whether the tenant is at war with the landlord. So will that relationship between landlords and tenants change in some way regarding the proposed changes? What do you think?
I think so. I think that's the goal of the proposed changes. It's not just to protect tenants, but also to foster a more positive and sustainable relationship between tenants and landlords. So I think it's definitely a step in that direction. The laws are aiming to ensure fair practices like limiting the rent increases and allowing pets and the minor modifications. And the outcome should be that tenants feel more at home and hopefully inclined to stay longer, and that hopefully benefits landlords with more stable tenancies. So it could be a win-win if it plays out the way that I think it will. So I think overall, I think the initial proposal for these changes was a little bit more extreme, and then it was watered down to this. And I'm actually quite happy with this, and our property management team tend to agree that it's a good approach and some positive changes for once coming out of government.
So we got through it. Legislative changes in WA as explained and broken down for us this morning from Matthew. So you're in Europe, and I think you're heading off. Are you shortly going to Dubai?
Yeah, that's the tail end of the trip. We've tried to sort of break up the flights to avoid really long flights with a 2 and a 4-year-old. So we're departing, I think Rome is our last stop in Italy, and then we're off to Dubai, which is not a long trip. And then we've got 4 nights there, and then we're back via Singapore. So the big long legs are all broken up in sort of 5 to 7 hour flights, which will be great.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your trip. Look forward to catching you back in a few weeks' time once you're back there in Perth. And thanks again for, really sort of going beyond the pale here, because you've broken into your holiday to jump on the podcast. So well done for that.
My pleasure, Craig. Thanks for having me, mate.
Gain insights with exclusive conversations from real estate professionals about buying, selling and investing across Australia.
You've got one of the biggest female brokerages in Australia.
Yeah, we do actually. Obviously dealing with finance and dealing with people's very big time in their life when they're purchasing property, it can be quite intimidating, and we just love to guide people through the process.
Where should somebody start if you don't know what you're eligible for when it comes to these schemes?
First home buyers, there's a first home guarantee that the government have. There's quite a few different sort of types that are out there. So there's a first home owner scheme, which is to buy a property established or do construction. There's a regional scheme. If you want to buy with a friend or a mate or a sibling, the ability to do that now.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.